All right, it looks like we are ready to go. Let me share this really quickly. We're a little bit late. I've had a migraine all day and I had a million things to do on the computer today. Planning my daughter's senior trip with her dad, doing a Walmart pickup order because we were just gone all last week. So lots and lots and lots of things that I've been doing today. Getting the kids through school. A normal Monday, but with a lot of paperwork and stuff that I've got to do. I think I found some pretty good flights though for my daughter's senior trip. So she's just about to be done with school. She's really going to try to get done with school. Just a second. Wait for everyone to join. So excuse the frizzy hair and all of that. It's been a long day with the migraine. So, okay. Hey, Julia. Hi, Ashley. Okay, so we are ready to go. Now, I did want to get on to my Facebook because I wanted to read a post. This all just came from speaking with a friend about this subject and how we can kind of break different generational family things that maybe we were raised in not so ideal of situations where we were raised in a toxic home or, whatever it is, breaking that cycle so our kids can be a little bit healthier than we were or are. So our kids don't have the baggage that they have to work through. So our kids can have a better foundation when they enter into marriage and start their own families. So I am going to come down here and my husband preached sermon two on the home last night. Definitely check out my community tab on this channel and give those sermons a listen. I think every young parent should be giving those a listen. They're extremely helpful and you can build a good foundation if you listen to those things. So I wanted to read this post that I did April 12th to just 2 days ago. And it kind of goes along with all the subject that we're going to be going more into depth during this podcast. So if you were neglected as a child, you can choose to pay attention to your kids. If you were cussed at, threatened, and bullied as a kid, you can choose to treat others with kindness. If you were mocked, you can treat others with empathy. If you were raised in a toxic family, you can have a healthy family. If you were raised in a filthy environment, you can choose to have a clean environment for your kids to be raised in. If you were raised in chaos, you can choose to raise your kids in peace. If you were raised in a heathen home, you can raise your kids in a godly home. If you had to walk on eggshells in your home, you can raise your kids in a home where they feel safe, safe to express every emotion, feeling, and sadness without fear of being yelled at or cussed at or hit. If you were raised where you were made to feel like a bother, you can raise your children to know they are precious beyond anything in this world. If you were raised in a family where horrible things were shouted at each other, you can choose to speak with kindness and love. If you were raised in an angry home, you can choose to have a calm home. If you were raised by abusive parents, you can choose to be loving. You have the ability and the power to break whatever cycle you were raised in. Take the hurts, take those bad moments as a kid, and determine that your kids will have it differently. You don't have to follow patterns. You don't have to keep the cycle going. You have the ability and the power to change it for your kids. You can provide the calm, happy, loving home that they need. You can give them good memories. You don't have to be the source of their pain. In fact, you can be the source for being their safe, the one they talk to when going through things, the one they can tell anything to, the one that they know will love them deeply and unconditionally. They're calm, they're safe, they're refuge. You can be the change that your kids need. You choose to be that change, and no one else can choose that for you. You've got this. So I wrote that just as an encouragement for maybe, I know many of the Gently Led Sisters listeners were raised in homes that weren't ideal. Maybe you were physically abused. Maybe you were emotionally neglected. Maybe you were kept physically alive, but not really taught how to have healthy relationships with others. we can be the change for our kids. And in this podcast, I want to go over some things that we have the power to change in our own homes. We have the ability to break the cycle. And honestly, you are the only one that holds that power of breaking that cycle. You are. Hey, Sarah, and hey, Marta. So you are the one alone that holds the power to break the cycle of whatever that never-ending cycle is. You know, statistics show that if you are raised in an abusive home, you tend to carry on that abuse unless you realize this is not right, this is wrong, and you change. Statistics show that if you were raised by an alcoholic father, you tend to be drawn more towards alcohol. But you can have victory over that as well, or just not even ever touch it and go down that road. Statistics show if you were raised by an angry parent, you have the tendency to have anger problems as well. If you were raised by a yeller, you tend to be a yeller. You know, whatever it is you were raised in, you tend to keep that cycle going. But there are some very, very harmful cycles in life. There are abusive cycles, there are anger cycles, there are just cycles of toxic home life that we don't want to continue on another generation with our kids. So obviously, every kid has to make their own choice on how they're going to run their home, how the mom they're going to be, you know, so on and so forth. But we really do have the ability to shape our kids into functioning adults that aren't going to need therapy after they grow up. So, hey, Daylin. So, yes. My husband's sermons have been going hand in hand kind of with what I've been talking about in April. And he focused on love in the home last night, because if that love is missing, then you're going to have a hard time raising children that really are functioning and healthy and whole. So, but let's talk about first breaking the cycle when it comes to how we do marriage and how our kids see marriage. Okay. So think back on, I want you this whole podcast. Okay. So this is kind of how I've lived my life when different things. I don't know if this is like a coping thing or just because I have a type A personality. So whatever hurts have been done to me in my life, I try to do the opposite and tap back into those feelings of when that happened and try to treat people completely opposite of the way I was. So during this podcast, I want you to think back to your childhood. Maybe you had a really tough upbringing, okay? Maybe you were raised by angry parents. You were raised by yellers, cussers, parents that threw things at you, parents that raged out, parents that were physically abusive. Think about all those times as a little kid. Take your mind back to those spots when that would happen. How did you feel in that situation? How did it make you feel? And this might be triggering for some of you as we talk about some of these things. So just fair warning, but think back to how that made you feel. And I want you to take those feelings and I want you now to think of the precious faces of your own kids. And would you want them to feel that same way when it came to how you react to them? Because kids are going to try your patience. They're going to push you. They know how to push buttons, but you're the adult in the situation and you need to keep your calm. And you need to think back to times in your life where you have a core memory of something that happened, okay? Whether that's not even anything to do with your parents. Maybe it's just in school. You have a core memory of being bullied. You have a core memory of being mocked, being made fun of. You have a core memory of just doing something really stupid and then the whole school finding out and you could never live it down. You know, take those feelings. And when there comes a situation in life where you can choose to either mock someone else, put someone else down, bully someone else, or you can be the encourager, choose to be the encourager. Choose to make that person have good feelings when they think back to that time in their life when they were embarrassed or they did something stupid. But instead of mocking them, you encourage them. So I want you to kind of have that mindset this whole podcast, okay? Because that's one thing that's really helped me. And I think it's helped me because I don't want to become bitter and angry and just constantly like all this bitterness spilling over, because I've seen bitter people and I've seen just how it made them look years older and it changed their whole entire countenance, and they couldn't smile and they couldn't laugh because they were just always sitting there seething about things done to them. And I didn't want to become that person. So I've taken the hurts in my own life and I've tried to be better in those areas so that my kids won't have that same hurt. So my friends won't have that same hurt. So those around me won't have those same hurts. So at least for me, I'm in charge of how I react and I'm in charge of my words and my actions. I can be different towards people than, what I was shown. So when it comes to how we do marriage and how our children see marriage, remember the things that made you feel uncomfortable as a kid. Did it made you feel uncomfortable when your parents were yelling? Or when they called each other names, when they threw things, when they had horrible, nasty disagreements in front of you, when they made you maybe pick a side, um, do you think dad's right in this? Agree with me, mom's right, whatever. Don't ever pit the kids against you and your husband. So think back to those times of the times in your life where you were just on edge, right? Everyone knows when mom and dad aren't happy. And obviously there's going to be uncomfortable times in life. And I'm not talking about a slight disagreement here and there. I'm talking about constant turmoil. I'm talking about constant anger. Yes, there are times when my husband and I argue. It's usually resolved pretty quickly. For the most part, when it's just little spats, we don't try to hide that from the children. Every husband and wife are going to have little spats. But is it every day? Is it every hour? Is it constant? Is the core memory of them observing you and your husband going to be yelling, screaming, throwing things, calling names? So that's been one thing that we have never done in our marriage. We don't yell at each other. We don't call names. We don't throw things. We don't hit things. We don't use physical whatever. My husband is a very calm man, and he is very, 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 very slow to anger. So I've known in times past when someone gets him angry, it's a big deal because he is very, very, very slow to anger. And usually he will not respond unless you pushed him too far. But when you push him too far, he will come down. And it's been that way with things that have gone on in the church, in our home, with the boys. Like, yeah, they kind of know dad is a long, long fuse. He does not have a short fuse. And so that's just never taken part in our home. Now, he wasn't raised in that either. I wasn't really either. I don't remember, there was not like yelling and screaming. I remember my mom and dad getting in arguments, but it was nothing big, So thankfully, I saw it when my parents' marriage, that was a good example for me. My husband, he had a good example when it came to that, but maybe you're not from that home. So you're going to really have to reframe your mindset when it comes to how you react, because what you see as a kid and growing up is how you're going to pattern all of your reactions. Okay. So when I saw my mom get mad, she would cuss my dad out. So when I get mad, I guess I'm just going to cuss my husband out. When I saw my dad get mad, he would cuss my mom out. So I guess when I get mad, it's okay. So you're going to have to really reframe your mindset. No, it's not okay. It's not okay to yell at your husband. It's not okay to call him names. It's not okay to throw things. It's not okay to be belligerent and, just mock your husband, especially in front of your kids. It's not okay. So you're going to have to readjust your mindset when it comes to that. Show them the power of having a disagreement, but resolving it quickly, without threats, without name calling, without yelling. Don't ever say the word divorce in front of them. Show them that dad is number one. And this is a well-established fact in our home. Dad is number one in my life. So, dad gets his food first. And my priority is, what does dad want? Oftentimes the kids will tell me, I just had actually someone asked me, one of my older kids asked me yesterday, Mom, do you think there's any chance of this happening? And I said, no. And I said, I know your dad, and he's going to say no. And they were just like, are you sure? I'm like, no, I don't even have to ask. Like, it's a no. And they accept that because what dad wants goes. And I've been married to him for so long, I can pretty much read his mind. I can read his mannerisms and his facial expressions and everything. So I know what the answer is going to be just by looking at him. But yeah, what he wants goes. So then just remember, when it comes to marriage, if you are in an abusive marriage, get help, please. Don't let your husband abuse your kids, especially. I mean, you're one thing too. I don't want you to be abused. I don't want you to be hit. But when it comes to those precious children, you need to get help. You need to reach out to authorities. You need to reach out to your pastor. You need to reach out to whoever will help you be safe and get help. Okay. So God forbid any of you that watch me are in that situation. But if you are, get help. So, and it is proven that girls who grow up in homes where the dad is abusive to the mom, they have daddy issues, right? Or their dad is abusive towards them. They have daddy issues. And for some reason, they are drawn to very angry, abusive men. So, maybe you were in a home where you didn't have the greatest relationship with your dad, and you do find yourself tend to be drawn to these like super controlling, angry, just abusive men. Really watch out for that. Be careful, because whoever you choose to marry, they're not going to change after they get married. And in fact, things are probably going to get worse. Whatever personality they have while you're dating, take that and add like 10 years of stress and financial hardships and kid after kid after kid and the stress of daily living. So if you are dating someone and it's your happy time and they are angry, they're abusive, they're hurting you, they're, just tearing you down with their words, they're cussing at you, they're calling you names, that's not going to get better after you get married. It's not. And a lot of guys will try to kind of trick women. Oh, it'll be fine once we get married, especially if you're keeping yourself pure. It'll be fine once we're having a physical relationship. No, men, for the most part, don't change, and neither do women. So if you are dating and you're in that happy time and things are already bad, that's a huge red flag. Just watch out for that. So that's a tip to single women. But if you do find yourself in that situation where you are in an abusive marriage, get out, get help, and then teach your kids to not marry into that when they're old enough. So, and then that, try to break the cycle then. But what about breaking the cycle when it comes to how we raise them? Okay. So if you were emotionally neglected, and I think this is a generational thing. I do think my mom's era, which is the boomer generation, they, I don't know, they were really toxic when it came to like feelings and expressing your feelings and doing it in healthy ways. Okay, that generation overall just seems like they really dropped the ball. And, I was kind of raised with the mindset of, I don't know, not showing emotion. And that kind of created who I am today. It's very rare that I show emotion. It's almost like emotion was a sign of weakness, I think. And that's ingrained in me. So because of that, because I have a few very emotional daughters, I've really had to learn how to balance my approach with a lot more grace, because I have the tendency to just be like, you know what? You better only be crying like if someone's dying, because that's the only time I cry in my life is like someone has died. Okay. So I've had to work on that since getting married and having kids. Now, my husband knew I had a tougher than nails like personality when he married me, and he liked that because he knew, and boy, did we not know how it was gonna all the things that would be coming our way. But he knew being in the ministry, he would need a wife that was as tough as nails, because he knew the problems and the blessings both of being in ministry. And he knew that there was going to be a lot of hard times and there was going to be a lot of knuckleheads. And, I had to be able to withstand a lot of things, especially him being a church planter. We didn't know when we got married he'd be planting a church eventually, but God perfectly matched us, I guess, perfectly matched us for the trials and everything lying ahead. So our personalities just mesh completely. We're both firstborns, and he needed someone with my type of personality. So if you were emotionally neglected, if you were told just not to feel anything, emotion was a sign of weakness, whatever that silliness is, let your kids know that you're available to talk to whenever, you know, trust your gut when it comes to how your kids are doing. I have almost never been wrong. I can sense when something's off with one of my kids. And it could be something like they are not feeling seen by me. They're not feeling heard by me. Maybe I've been really busy and they've been trying to have a conversation with me. And this happens a lot when you have older kids and younger kids. Sometimes you just have to tell the little kids, I am talking. with your sister, she needs my attention. You need to go play in another room. And I've had to do that several times because the babies are vying for my attention. But I've got an 18-year-old who needs to talk about something kind of serious, or I've got a 20-year-old who's questioning some things. And so I really need to give my undivided attention to them. So, let your kids know that you're available to talk. Trust your gut. Moms are very in tune with their kids. Okay. We know when something's on their mind, we know when something's on their heart. And the heart is the biggest issue in raising children. Your kids' hearts need to be right. They need to be right when it comes to you and your husband. They need to be right when it comes to God and the things of the Lord, when it comes to church, when it comes to relationships with other people. You can kind of start seeing if there's a heart issue that pops up. And as mamas, we have a way of getting to the root of it. Daddies, they have a way of being tough when tough love comes in. But mamas, we have a way of getting to the heart of things. Okay. Be in tune to the emotions your children are having. Sometimes toddlers have huge emotions. Sometimes 20-year-olds have huge emotions. And we need to be in tune with whatever they're going to. Be their safe. Let them come to you with their big emotions sometimes. And you're the adult. So you are the one that has more life experience, and they're looking to you for your advice, for, your wisdom, for your life experiences. So just be their safe. And that's one thing I've always tried to be with my kids. I want them to feel safe talking to me about things. Now, I have some that will tell me every thought that's going in their head every second of the day. And I don't even worry about them because I know what's going on. I know if an issue is going to pop up and I can address it. I have others who are very, very, very closed off about their emotions. And what I've learned with them is that they have to work through it themselves. I tell them, I'm here when you want to talk about it, but it has to be on their terms. It has to be in their time. And I think as moms, we just want it to get fixed, right? We know something's going on and we just want it to get fixed. So we have, at least with me, with my personality, I'm the type that's like, okay, let's talk about it. Let's figure this out. We'll figure out a solution and boom, done. Move on with our life, right? That's my personality. I have some that aren't like that. It takes them a little bit longer to really think about things and pray about things. And okay, what's my next move going to be? Well, I would have that decided in a day. Okay, this is what we're going to do. Done. Not them. And as moms, a lot of times we try to get our kids to do what our personality would do, but we got to realize every kid has a different personality. So with my kids, with some of my bigs that have been more closed off, I know they'll eventually talk to me about it. So I've learned to just take a step back and pray. Prayer is a huge tool in our toolbox that we don't use enough. I pray constantly. I pray when I wake up. I pray when I go to bed. I pray when I'm driving. And I know something's going on and I can sense it. And so I pray about it. And then usually within a week, they'll come to me. And then, it gets fixed and it gets resolved and we move on. And, but as mamas, we're very, very in tune with our kids and their hearts and what's going on in their minds. And, it's something that we always have to stay on top of because raising kids is much more than just keeping them alive for 18 years. Okay. When you're raising kids, you have to have their hearts. You have to have their best interests in mind. You have to constantly be watching and praying and, looking at those little character flaws that maybe they need to work on, but then not pushing too hard. When it comes to big decisions in their life, letting them navigate it and praying, and then just trusting that you raised them the right way. And, I have a 22-year-old and a 20-year-old and an almost 18-year-old on the cusp of making very big decisions right now. And I have been hands off. Anyone that knows me as a parent knows I'm hands off when it comes to my adult kids. I am there for advice. I am there to give my blessing. But if there's an issue, I'm not going to push and prod. I'm going to wait for them to come to me. And thankfully, they all have, they've all come to me with issues and we get it resolved. So, show grace, especially with your littles when it comes to hunger, being tired, a long day. I've really seen some of the parenting methods of these over the top, disciplinarians where, they will come down hard on a 3-year-old because they're crying or throwing a fit over the sucker they didn't get when they've literally been up since 6:30 in the morning. Maybe it's a Sunday. Literally been up since 6:30. They've been running, going nonstop. And then they throw a fit because, hey, they wanted a sucker. And this has not happened in my church, just so you know, not with the members we have now, just to clarify. This is usually when I'm visiting other places or, I'm around different groups of people. And I will see that parent almost as a way to proudly display that they're not letting their kid get away with nothing. They'll beat the fire out of that little kid, that little 3-year-old. And it's ridiculous. And I've seen over the top reactions. And I've actually talked to pastors of churches about it because it really concerned me. It really worried me. So there have been things that I've seen that were completely over the top, and you need to show some grace. We get we get tired, we get hungry, we get grouchy. Why are you expecting your little 3-year-old to act like a 25-year-old, first of all, and not ever show signs of hunger or being tired or not ever cry? That's ridiculous. And it's completely asinine to expect that from your little 3-year-old. They've only been alive for 3 years. They're not going to possess the self-control that an adult would have. So, and you're not even perfect all the time anyway. So you get grouchy without your coffee. Don't even act like you're perfect. So, be really careful when it comes to being over the top with your kids. My kids struggle the most on the days after church. So Mondays are usually we're on the struggle bus, and then Thursday we're on the struggle bus because Wednesday night they're up really late. They're up past their bedtime. The littles are up past their bedtime. And then Sunday, it's just Monday is kind of a reset day. I don't teach. It's getting caught up on computer work. It's getting caught up on stuff my husband needs to do for him. It's getting groceries. It's doing Gently Led Sisters. It's getting and the kids are still doing school on Mondays too. But my littles, I give them a lot more grace on Mondays because I'm not going to expect them after a full day of church and being around people and being drained with their social battery. I'm not going to expect them to be perfectly perfect on Mondays. So, you have to give them grace. Head off meltdowns before they happen. I almost feel like I've seen some parents too, like set up situations where their kid's going to have a meltdown. Like every other kid gets a sucker in the church, and then you're going to take this time to take your stand against sugar. And then you get surprised when there's a meltdown. And then you have to beat your kid to show what a great parent you are, because I'm not going to let my kid have a meltdown over a sucker when like every other kid in the church got a sucker. That's ridiculous. And that's mean, honestly. And you can tell when a meltdown's about to happen and you can head it off. And that just comes down to knowing your child, knowing what they're going to get upset about. And I'm not saying that you're just like bribing them so a meltdown doesn't happen. But no, if you know meltdowns happen when they're super sleepy and super tired, try to avoid situations when they haven't had a nap where that could happen, or give them a nap. There's 3 things that have helped when my kids are overwhelmed, when they're tired, when they need extra grace. And there is, what is it? Water, food, or nap. Water, food, or nap. Water, take a bath. Stick them in the bathtub. Let them go outside and play in the hose. Food, feed them. Kids, Hannah especially gets very hangry. If she has not had food for a while, she tends to have a meltdown. So I'm on top of that. That's what I'm talking about, avoiding the meltdowns. Stay on top of your kids' needs. Stay on top of your kids' food needs. Stay on top of your kids' emotional needs. Stay on top of your kids' physical needs when it comes to taking a nap. Different things like that. So we're moms. We're smart when it comes to our kids. We know how to head off the meltdowns. So sometimes you can solve problems that pop up without your first resort just being spank, 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 beat, 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 blah, blah, blah. Obviously, I know spanking is biblical, and I'm going to give you some guidelines kind of based off the sermon that my husband preached at Pastor DeVries' church. Just a few guidelines when it comes to this, because as a parent, you love your child and you're going to know when you're going too far. You're going to know if you're spanking your kid because you're trying to avoid him being hit by a car later on, and you want to show him that it's very serious, we don't go running out in the road, right? So that, or you're just like embarrassed that your kid made you feel bad in front of other parents, and so you take out your frustration on him. Please don't ever do that. That's horrible. Encourage your kids to tell you their feelings. Let them acknowledge that they're having a hard time. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling frustrated. Why are you sad? Why are you frustrated? Tell me your feelings. What's going on? Why are you having a meltdown? Can you explain to me what the issue is? And then sometimes it's just that they're hungry or tired or whatever. Sometimes they're just, blatantly disobeying you, and that's when it needs to be dealt with. But your first resort shouldn't always just be, I'm just going to beat my child. Okay. That's bad teaching. So say I love you often, even to your older kids. Older kids need to hear it too. It shouldn't stop at like age 10. Your older kids need to hear you say, I love you. Have a peaceful going to bed experience every night. That's the last thing they're going to, remember going to sleep. And then have a peaceful waking experience in the morning. No one wants to wake up to screaming, yelling, that's not good for the nervous system at all. It's not good for adrenaline. It's not good for the nervous system. So if you were physically abused, this might be a harder area for you because you might take the opposite thinking of all corporal punishment is horrible because my parents did it in excess and too much and I was physically abused. The Bible does talk about corporal punishment and that hasn't changed. So it is still biblical, but remember that it is biblical, but you need to do it the right way. Okay. So, and this is just one area where I have women who watch me who aren't like a Christian. They're not saved. They might be religious, but I have women who watch me that were maybe raised in a home where this went on. And I completely understand why you would be very leery of it. And almost like in a way, you'd have a hard time trusting yourself to not overdo it because it was overdone to you. And I can understand the fears. So obviously it comes down to you deciding what's best for your children. But biblically, it is physical discipline is talked about. So, but that being said, here's a couple guidelines for it. A couple SWATs should do it. You shouldn't have to just go crazy on your kid. If you are, I feel like you're just taking your anger out on them. That's just my train of thought. Kids should outgrow it. You shouldn't have to spank your teenagers. And I stand by that. You shouldn't even have to spank your 12-year-old. By the time they get to about 9 or 10, you should be able to guide them with your eye. You should be able to tell them what you want them to do and them listen and obey. Most of the time, by the time my kids are, I don't know. I want to say, we went on this trip last week and to Kentucky, and we didn't have to give either of the babies a SWAT one time the entire week. So my kids learn pretty early. You know, as long as if they're obeying us and they're listening to us, it's not like you shouldn't have to spank your kids 20 times a day. So, and they should outgrow it pretty quickly. I feel like most of the time, by the time my kids are 7 or 8, they're not even really getting spanked. And it's like a couple swats. Okay. I'm not talking 10-minute spankings, 5-minute spankings, this whole spanking marathon. That's ridiculous. They should outgrow it. You should not leave lasting marks. So if you're bruising your kid, you're going too far. If you are leaving, bloody welts, you're going too far. If you're leaving marks all over your kid, especially not even on their behind, other parts of their body, you're going too far. So you shouldn't be breaking spoons on them. You shouldn't be breaking paddles or sticks or whatever. You're overdoing it then, Don't do it as a way to cool off your anger. It might make you feel good in the moment because you're so mad that this kid made me look so bad. But that's not the right way to discipline at all. A sting is all it takes. You're just inflicting a little bit of sting. Don't do it to impress others. Most should be done in the home. The home is the training ground. The public is the testing ground. And then don't hit other parts of their bodies. You don't need to be hitting their head. You don't hit their arm. You don't hit their back. You don't hit their legs. You don't hit their feet. You don't hit their face. You hit their behind. It's the padded part of your body that it's not going to leave lasting, damage to it. So God made it that way. And I know my take is still controversial, but this is allowed in pretty much I don't know if it's allowed across the pond. I don't know if it's allowed there, but this is allowed. Corporal punishment is allowed pretty much in every area of the world, I think. I know for sure America, it's not illegal or anything. So, but as with everything, you have to be the one in control. You can't be out of control when you're doing this. And if you feel like you are, you need to like go into another room, cool off for a minute, and then come back to it. Okay. So, what about when it comes to relationships with others and extended family? Because this does play a lot into, things that we observed growing up, like how our parents did friendships, how our parents did churches, things like that. Things did play into our relationships as we grow up. So just a few things. Don't be easily offended. If you grew up in a home where your mom or your dad was constantly angry over something someone had done to them, learn from that. Learn how it made you feel tense and on edge because you knew they were friends with the Smiths, and the Smiths had one of your, their daughter was one of your best friends. And then you knew that if that relationship ended, then it was going to be weird with your friendship with the daughter. And, it just made you feel fearful and tense. And be someone who is not easily offended. Don't burn bridges. Don't make people walk on eggshells around you. Forgive people. Show your kids how you can have disagreements with others without torching the relationship. So many people are just so quick to torch relationships. I'm not one of those people. I've had a friendship that has lasted since I was 12 years old. So, and that will last until we both die. So I've had that. I've had other friendships that have lasted for decades, decades and decades. So I'm not one to torch relationships quickly, and I usually don't like being the one doing it. Sometimes friendship's cool for whatever reason that is. But if that happens, I'm still not one that's going to like turn on that person and like go after them or whatever. That's just, that makes me kind of sick to my stomach. So when other people do it to people that used to be friends, it makes me sick. So I'm not going to do that. And then if you grew up church hopping, okay, so let's say that you grew up, you never really were a part of like a solid church or anything. And you want different for your kids. You want your kids to have like deep relationships, right? Because finding a good church and sticking with it for decades, it brings a beauty to your life. Okay. There's a beauty in decade-long relationships at church, and you can show your kids what that looks like. Part of that is just by learning to be forgiving and putting up with people. A lot of times when you grow up in a house where you're constantly moving, you're constantly hopping churches, there's no stability. One year you're living in this state, another year you're living in this state, you're going to this church, you get sick of that and find out everyone has faults, you go to another church. You don't have time to really establish those super deep friendships. So there's people in our church that have been here now for over a decade, and we're very close to them because we've been on missions trips together, and we've gone soul winning almost every week, and we've broken bread, had fellowship with them almost every week, and we've spent a lot of days together and a lot of moments together. And so there's just something about decades long friendships that just having a friendship for a year or two, that doesn't even compare. So, learn to be forgiving and put up with people. Be the member in a church that you would want in your church if you planted it. Put yourself in the position of a church planter. Now, as a church planter, if you had to go plant a church in some random town and you were doing everything by yourself, what are some things that you would love if members had? Okay, one of them is just showing up. You would love to have people to preach to, right? One of them is just showing up, being involved, being there when activities are planned, getting involved in ministries, whether that's music ministry, cleaning ministry, just specials, doing specials, cleaning the bathrooms, whatever it is, putting up tables and chairs. There's people in our church that do that, and it's a huge blessing. So just be the member that you would be in a church if you planted it. That might help you. And then just being there helps so much. So then lastly, just overall, if you grew up in a toxic home, okay, you can cultivate a calm household, even if you grew up in a toxic home. So number one, limit the yelling. If you grew up and you hated the way that you were made to feel when you were being yelled at, Don't do that to your kids. Remember that feeling. Okay. So limit the yelling, watch the anger. Anger is one of the most divisive things in a home because even if someone goes 265 days without having a temper tantrum or flipping out or throwing things or yelling and screaming and cussing like a sailor, let's say they go 265 days. Well, your kids are going to remember day 266 when you flipped your lid, when you lost it. That's going to be a core memory that they're going to think back to. Oh, this is when mom went after dad and got physical with him. Oh, this is when dad threw things at mom. Oh, this is when dad cussed mom out. They're going to remember that. They're going to remember when you lost your cool. So you can say, I am a great wife 265 days of the year. But if you're a bad wife and you do horrible things on the one day of the year, that's what's going to be, your family is going to remember and they're going to think back on that. That's going to be a memory and you don't want that. So watch the anger. Another way to have a calm household is playing edifying music. Oftentimes through our home, we'll have college groups mainly singing. Musicals are a little fun. We like Newsies and, different Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. We like songs from that. So just having nice edifying music or fun music, promotes a calm. Establish good guidelines early with your kids. So that's like cleanliness in the home, hygiene, chores, routine, order. If you struggle in this because you were never really shown how, Amanda and I did a show a couple weeks ago about just coming up with good things to help you run the home, clean the home, all that stuff. So if you struggle and you know that this is a weak area, have things in your life that can help with this, even if it's scheduling a shower every other day. I aim for every day, but, we should aim for every day. But, if it's just taking care of yourself, brushing your teeth, flossing your teeth, washing your face before bed every night. When I was younger, I was really bad about going to bed with makeup on. Since I'm an older mom now, and I kind of got to, because of wrinkles I'm getting, I got to take my skincare more seriously. So I actually wash it every night before I go to bed, put on a thick moisturizer. And I neglected that when I was younger. When I was so busy, sometimes I would just fall into bed exhausted at night. But, now I kind of take a little bit more time to do that. Using edifying words in your home. Not having profanity in your home. Don't call names, belittle, mock your children, yell at your children. And Sarah, I agree. Self-care was the hardest for me when I had 3 little kids. Definitely was. I wrote a post, I don't know, regarding that time in my life, and it's on my blog. I can't remember which post it was, but I basically was talking about some days I didn't have time to shower and I would just do like a baby wipe bath. And I was criticized really badly for that. And I'm thinking, are these women criticizing me? Women who have never had 3 little kids in 3 years. Like, it's hard sometimes. And yeah, I want to smell nice and I want to smell fresh. And sometimes that's a sponge bath. And, they give sponge bath to people in hospitals. And so sometimes a sponge bath is all that you have time for. But that was just a way, I had my line, like I needed to be clean. And if I can't have a full shower, I'm going to have a sponge bath. So I was criticized. I was like on Free Ginger or something. They criticized me all over. I remember, no, I think someone wrote a blog post criticizing me over it because it was one of the times I Googled my name. Don't do that if you don't have thick skin. If you have a platform at all and people hate you. So it was one time when I Googled my name and it popped up, like some woman really took the time to write a post ripping me for doing a baby shower bath or a baby wipe bath. Okay, then. I'll send it to you, Sarah. It's on my blog somewhere in the early days. And guys, I need to keep up with my blog. I'm paying for my blog. I'm paying for my whole website. And it's a really nice website. It's a really nice blog. I might enlist one of my kids' help. I mainly post my writings on my Facebook page. I need to go back like several years, take off my Facebook. I don't know why I just don't have it linked where it does it automatically, but I need to put all of my writings from my Facebook page onto my actual blog. Does anyone even read blogs anymore? Guys, tell me if you read blogs, or is it like mainly Facebook pages? Because I think like my blog is becoming obsolete. I think we're kind of more like, for me, I primarily use Facebook. So And it's apparently getting out there because I have a lot of insecure men preaching against me because of my Facebook posts. So, um, obviously people are seeing it and it's off my Facebook. Tell me if you read blogs. Leave a comment. If you read blogs, leave a comment. Or does anyone even know that my blog exists? That's a good question too. So, but anyways, be an encouragement to your kids. That creates a calm home. It creates a non-toxic home. And then be present physically, but also emotionally for your children. Yeah, see, everyone's saying they don't even read blogs. I think it's really like an outdated thing. I wrote a lot for my blog when I was a younger mom. That was like all the rave back then. But I really feel, and I didn't have Facebook or any social media platform. I only had my blog. And I feel like that's kind of becoming obsolete, like my generation. And the younger generation is just doing like Facebook posts and stuff. So that is good food for thought. So then lastly, whatever, and I talked about this at the beginning, whatever bad has happened in your life, take the bad and reverse it for your kids. Okay. There's going to be bad days. And I'm not saying there's not. Remember, we're real on this show. We talk about the nitty gritty of motherhood. But those bad days can't turn into just nonstop bad days that turn into nonstop bad weeks, that turn into nonstop bad months, that turn into nonstop bad years, because your kids are going to remember that. So you're going to have a bad day and just roll with it, get through it. But then the next day is fresh with no mistakes in it yet. Okay. So just turn it around on the next day. Just wake up. It's going to be better than yesterday. And then celebrate your accomplishments. Celebrate when you keep it together. Celebrate it when you don't lose your temper. Encourage your kids, love on your kids, hug them, kiss them, tell them how great they are, tell them how awesome they are. Don't fall into a pattern of toxicity. Okay. Don't just keep that pattern going. You have the ability to break it. So make good memories for your kids. You don't want their childhood to be one bad memory. And in anyone's childhood, even in the ones that have grown up in abusive homes, they will tell you there was good moments. It wasn't all bad. There was good moments. But yet it's those bad moments that they kind of replay, over and over and over in their head. Now, for me, it was like 110% good with my dad. So he was amazing. He was awesome. But there was a couple times I was a little sassy as a teenager. And I remember those sassy times and I regret them. Nothing he did. It was me. But I'm sure, like for him, if he's in heaven and he can see anything that goes on in my life, I'm sure he only remembers the good things. He remembers the good times that he had with all of his kids. He remembers playing ball with me. He remembers teaching me how to drive. He remembers taking me out on daddy-daughter dates. He remembers opening the window and yelling, "Race car daddy," out the window as we went through town and embarrassing all of us, right? So I literally only have good memories when I think of my dad. There's literally not one negative thing that I can think that he ever did, with the exception of my sassy mouth. He was that good of a dad. So, that's what we all want for our kids, right? And I'm sure there were times. Now, he wasn't even a very angry man, though. See, and I married someone like my dad. And this goes once again, this goes back to we kind of marry what's emulated in the home for us. And we're kind of drawn to that and attracted to that. My dad, even with the whole race car daddy thing, he liked to have fun. He liked to joke around. And my husband's the same way. And he's Jason. If you want to know my husband as a younger guy, look at Jason. Jason's hilarious. And he's just like his dad in that in that area. And my dad was very slow to anger and he had a very long fuse. And my husband is the same way, very slow to anger. My dad was so great with his daughters and he had four of them. He had four daughters and one son. My husband's the same way. He's so great with his girls. And then our first grandbaby is going to be a granddaughter. So we're going to have yet again another McMurtry girl. So it's just, yeah, I was drawn to what was emulated for me in the home. So, if you want your boys to be drawn to the good type of woman, be that example in the home because they'll tend to be drawn to that. If you want for your girls, them to be drawn towards good guys, hopefully your husband is a good example for them, and if not, try to be around people that are, get in a good church where they can have godly examples, the pastor, other laymen, really get into a church where they can have that or be around good godly families. So I hope that was a help and encouragement. Be the change that you want for your kids. Be the change that you need to be for your kids. Break the cycle. Break the cycle of toxicity. Have a calm home for your kids. Have a peaceful home and have a home where you live out what you believe day in and day out. So I hope you all have a great week. Go love on your husband. Go love on your kids. Go love